On your Canon DSLR, there's multiple ways to adjust your focus manually and also automatically. So in general, if you have your camera and you're just taking a photo, your camera's going to do a pretty good job at choosing the subject that you want to be in focus. As we saw before, if you press the shutter speed halfway down, you can see that it focuses on our subject or what it thinks our subject is. So in this example, it focuses on the camera cap that's in front of the camera. But say I want it to actually focus on the screwdriver behind it. How do we do that? Well, one is to switch over to manual focus mode, adjust our focus to the background, and just use the dial on the front of our camera lens to manually adjust our focus. But there's a better way to do this that will guarantee your focus is even sharper, because like I've said before, with most modern cameras and lenses, the autofocus is really, really good. So what we can literally do with this DSLR is just touch on the back of the screen where we want the focus to be. So see, if I go from the left or right, you can see this little box that appears on the screen and the focus adjusts. Now we can even take a picture like this. There's this little button down here on the bottom left of the screen that turns on touch shutter. So when we touch that lens cap, it goes and takes a photo. If we touch the screwdriver in the back, it takes the photo. But if we just wanted to be able to focus, and then we can take the photo ourselves with the shutter speed, we can do it that way. Another way to do it is to just manually move where this square is and then set the focus that way. So if you don't see that square, press the little set button in the middle of the dial and then use the plus pad to move the square around. And then when it's over what you want to be in focus, half press the shutter release button and it's going to focus on wherever that square is showing. This is going to look a little bit different on different DSLRs. You might not have to press the set button to actually enable that. You might already see a little box that you can move around with a joystick or with a plus pad. So that's how you can choose where to focus and what to focus on with your camera and lens. You can do it with the manual option, you can use it with the touchscreen if your camera does have the touchscreen option, or you can use it by setting that autofocus point to a different part of your screen and then using the shutter release button to lock in focus that way. There are a couple other options like autofocus modes, like tracking faces and things like that we'll be going over in a future lesson as well. That really helps you dial in your focus depending on your situation. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome to this next lesson. In this lesson and the following ones, we're just going to be looking at the rest of the features and basically going button by button on the back of your camera. Again, this might be different if you're using a different DSLR model, but all of these options should be available to you. Typically, you'll be able to find it just by looking for the icon that is on the back of this camera. Or if you can't find it at all, if you go to the Q menu when you are looking at the back of the screen, if you look at the Q, all of these options are going to be the same on the back menu on this way, and you can kind of just go through them one at a time. So you'll see when I hit a specific button where it's going to actually appear. So the first one we're going to do is actually moving back to a focusing option. So we're going to start over here where it says AF. So if you press that button, you'll notice three options: one shot, AI focus, or AI servo. So again, if we press that, or if you're just looking at the back menu, you press the Q button and then you go down to this button right there that says one shot, and then you scroll through, you can switch through those options. Now, what are these? So with one shot, if you have your camera on autofocus, so these aren't gonna really change if you're on manual focus. If you're on autofocus, and you press the shutter button halfway down and you're looking at your subject, it's going to lock on that focus, and even if you move the camera, it's going to stick to that focus. So you can probably tell if I hold it halfway down, then I move it over here, look down, it's still locked on that focus, and so it's not going to change. And this is good if, for example, you're trying to focus on a subject that's right in the middle of the frame, like I'm focusing on this camera right here, but then you want to reframe and put your subject on the rule of thirds or use some negative space, change your camera around, something like that, and it's going to stick and keep that focus right on that point. Now with the other option, so let's go back to that menu, let's switch over to AI Servo. So AI Servo, rather than locking focus, if I move my lens, move my camera looking at something a little bit closer to me or farther than me, you can probably hear, even though I'm holding my shutter down, it's going to change the focus. This is great if you're trying to track moving objects, especially if you are tracking an object, a car, an animal, a person that's coming towards you. I would definitely recommend using the AI Servo mode. So this is more of like a continuous autofocus mode. So as I did that, it just kind of moved towards me. Now that will also help if you're using more of a burst mode. So we'll cover that in a second in a lesson in a couple lessons, and I'll show you how AI Servo can help there as well. Now the last option we saw was AI Focus. This is Canon's way of trying to automatically tell what you're trying to do. I wouldn't recommend using this method. I would just pick one because it's going to try to tell, are you taking photos of a moving object or not? And then it's going to pick one shot or AI Servo for you. My rule of thumb is if you're taking portraits, if you're taking pictures of still life, of street photography, of anything that's just kind of you want still and you're capturing still objects, maybe street photography, you might be capturing people moving and cars and things like that where you want AI Servo. But if you're doing architecture and things like that, choose one shot so that you can lock your focus down. Moving objects, sports, AI Servo. And of course, it's a good idea to just test it out yourself and see what you feel comfortable doing. Sometimes AI Servo might work well for you in either situation. Thanks a lot for watching. Next lesson, we'll move on around this dial to the next setting. All right, I have to apologize because I actually lied. I'm not gonna move around to the next one in this dial because there's an option that I want to cover that has to do with focus as well. So again, if we look here on our camera, we're actually gonna move back to the top display, and there's this button right here that is next to the ISO button. If we click on that button, we see that it brings up our focusing points menu. We can scroll through here and you can see that we have an option for, and we're gonna use the touch screen for this one, manual selection, manual select zone autofocus, manual select large zone autofocus, and then auto selection AF. So with the auto selection AF mode, the camera is actually looking at all of the points and trying to figure out what it thinks you want the subject to be and picking that point. And that point could be in the top right corner of your image, it could be in the bottom left, it could be in the center. If you are very particular and you know your subject is gonna be right dead in the center, then that's why you might want to change this to a different mode. You can also get to this mode if you don't have that button on the top, which looks like a little square with little points in the middle. You can also go here to this option right here, Autofocus Points. You can scroll through them like so. So we have large zone, we have zone AF, and then we have 1 point. It's easier to see on the menu if we actually look at the menu option right here, or we go into that menu to see what we're actually doing. So when we're in the manual selection, you can see I'm actually scrolling through and it's moving the point up or down. I can use the keypad or the plus pad over here, or the scroll to move left or right. So if I know that my subject is gonna be perfectly in the center, I'm gonna set that point right there. Now if I go up and I point and press the shutter button halfway down, you should see that there's only one point that is picking focus. And the camera is only going to focus on what's perfectly in the center of the frame. So if I move over here, well, let me take a picture first. If I move here, it's gonna take a picture, focus on the camera. If I move down here, it's gonna take a photo of the screwdriver, which is in front of me. And that's what's going to be in focus. Say you like using the rule of thirds, which means basically putting your subject on the third of the frame. So a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. We can set that point to the third, somewhere on the third side, or down below, which is technically the rule of thirds. Again, the photography masterclass covers all these things in more depth. And when we set it there, we don't want to press set, because when we press set, it goes back to the center. You just want to put it there and then start shooting. Now, it's only going to focus on what's on the third. So if your subject's in the middle, it's not going to necessarily focus on the center. Now, the other modes are kind of similar to that in the sense that if we go to our zone AF, you can see that the 9 squares in the middle are highlighted. So we can basically pick a larger zone for it to cover. And this might be better than the specific manual point, because if your subject is a little bit bigger or even a little smaller but moving around, you might want it to have a bigger zone to select. And then there's this even large zone. So this is literally just picking the middle third, the left third, or the right third. And so that's going to basically help you, again, focus on something in the middle, on the left, on the right. And again, if you pick this and you bring this up to your eye and you look through, you'll see now in that mode, the large AF zone, you'll see brackets for the zone you have selected. So know if you have those brackets, then it's only going to focus on something within those brackets. So I think this is a really cool option for helping you pick focus, especially if you're doing things like a portrait session and you know what's going to be in the center of the frame or on the left of the frame. What I like to do is I like to set it to the manual mode or just the zone mode and put it somewhere in the middle. And then if I'm on if we go back to our AF focus, if we choose one shot, then what I can do is I can focus on what's in the center of the frame and then reframe. So I could focus on my subject, but if I don't want my subject to be in the center of the frame, I'll move it over to the left or right, and they'll be on the third. So you can use these two options together, and that's why I wanted to include these lessons back to back. All right, if you have any other questions, let me know. One quick other thing though, is if you are in the live preview mode, this kind of gets thrown out the window. You can move this point or this box that's showing up here, up or down, but the zone points mode or picking manual points doesn't work in the live preview mode. So just a note there if you are trying to do it in the live preview mode. All right, now we're gonna go back around the dial and look at those options in the next videos.